The bell rings above the door. The smell hits you first. Something between newsprint, sugar, and the inside of a chest freezer. Behind the counter is a person who knows your mam's name and has an opinion about how much you're spending. 12 memories from that shop are on this list. If you grew up in Britain in the 70s or 80s, at least half of them will stop you mid-sentence. A glass-fronted case or a row of plastic tubs, each one holding a different thing at a different price, and you standing in front of it with a small amount of money and an enormous amount of time. The white paper bag appeared on the counter before you had finished deciding. The shopkeeper had patience, or at least performed it convincingly, while you deliberated between another blackjack and one of those pink shrimps, or whether you could actually afford the 2-penny chew if you put the cola bottle back. A penny in the 1970s would buy you 4 blackjacks or 4 fruit salads or a single refresher, and the calculation of the best combination occupied a serious amount of children's intellectual energy. The penny sweet counter was the first economy most British children ever participated in, a sphere of compressed boiled sugar roughly the size of a large marble, available in several sizes up to something approaching a small tennis ball, which changed colour as you sucked it and was therefore a source of ongoing reporting. It's green now, it was red before, now it's gone yellow. Henry Heimlich introduced his famous choking manoeuvre in 1974, just as Gobstoppers were at the height of their popularity, which is not a coincidence that anyone who sold them to children would care to dwell on. The large ones could not be crunched or bitten, only sucked, which meant they lasted. That was the point. A gobstopper was not a quick pleasure. It was a commitment, carried in the cheek, transferred to the hand when speaking, and returned to the cheek immediately after. Most children have a story about swallowing one unexpectedly. Both versions involve a parent's reaction. A small yellow paper bag of sherbet sealed at the top, with a flat cardboard lolly tucked into it. The lolly was for dipping into the sherbet. It went soggy within approximately 45 seconds, which meant you then had a choice between continuing to use it, which was unpleasant, or abandoning it and using your finger, which worked better but produced a different set of problems. Barrett's launched the Dip Dab in the 1970s, and it is technically still available, which puts it in the category of things that have survived in name, but not quite in the experience that made them memorable. The original paper bag had a particular texture and smell, and a way of getting sherbet absolutely everywhere that the modern sealed version does not replicate. Nobody who bought one in 1978 would say the current version is the same thing. They would be right. A small paper or cellophane bag sealed, containing an unknown quantity of mediocre sweets and a cheap plastic novelty of the kind found in Christmas crackers. A tiny comb, a ring that turned your finger green, a whistle that barely worked, a folded piece of paper with a joke on it. You could see through the bag well enough to know there were sweets in it, and the novelty was visible in outline but not in detail, and millions of British children bought them in the knowledge that the contents would almost certainly be disappointing. The novelty was always disappointing. The sweets were always mediocre. Nobody stopped buying them. The lucky bag lasted from the 1920s until the early 2000s on the strength of that alone. White candy sticks about the length of a real cigarette, with a small pink or red dot at one end to represent the lit tip, packaged in a box designed to look like a cigarette packet, complete with a brand name and occasionally a collectible card inside. From the 1930s through to the mid-70s, children carried these around the playground and pretended to smoke them, which parents either found charming or chose not to think about too hard. By the late 1970s, as public awareness of the health effects of smoking changed, the red tip quietly disappeared, and the product was renamed candy sticks, and the cigarette packet packaging became more generic. They are still sold under names like Fads, though the original version with the red tip was discontinued without announcement, which is appropriate for something that was always pretending to be something else. 4 for a penny. The foundational economy of the British playground sweet trade. Blackjacks were black, aniseed-flavoured chews that turned your tongue and teeth a distinctive grey-black that was impossible to conceal and deeply satisfying to display. Fruit salads were pink and yellow, strawberry and pineapple, slightly softer, arguably less aggressive. The debate about which was superior was conducted with genuine seriousness. Barrett's made both, and both were so cheap that the real question was never whether to buy them, but how many of each. They are still available and cost more than a penny each now, and have been reformulated at various points in ways that people who ate the originals claim to detect. Disc-shaped sweets made from rice paper, the same material used to line the bottom of macaroons, in pastel colours, each one containing a small amount of fizzing sherbet in the middle. The outside dissolved on the tongue almost immediately. The sherbet inside fizzed. They were invented in Belgium, where they are called UFOs, and arrived in Britain in the 1950s, where they became a permanent fixture of the penny sweet counter. Flying saucers are still available and have not materially changed, which puts them in a small and honourable category of things that survived the period intact. The rice paper still dissolves, the sherbet still fizzes, they are still sold loose in paper bags. This is one of the few items on this list about which there is genuinely nothing to mourn. A small packet of popping candy, sugar mixed with carbon dioxide under pressure, which released when it hit your tongue in a series of tiny crackles and pops that felt alarming, and produced an expression that other people found hilarious. Launched in the United States in 1975 as Pop Rocks by General Foods, it arrived in the UK as Space Dust, with space-themed packaging, including a picture of the moon. The combination of space dust and a bottle of Coca-Cola was rumoured to cause the stomach to explode, which was medically untrue and did not stop anyone trying it. Space dust was withdrawn in the early 1980s and reappeared periodically under different names. The original packaging, the crinkle of the foil, the specific pre-fizz anticipation, belongs to a Saturday afternoon in the late 70s that cannot be fully reconstructed. A white chest freezer near the door, padlocked in some shops and merely latched in others, containing ice lollies buried under frost that you had to rummage through to find. The lollies were not displayed. You had to dig. This was considered normal, and nobody questioned it. Lion's Maid produced funny faces, lemonade sparkles, orange fruities, and strawberry mivis throughout the 70s and 80s, each one a specific choice that children made with a consistency that suggested personality. The chest freezer lolly was a summer ritual that required the shop to be open, the money in your pocket, and the weather to justify it, which in Britain meant it happened with varying frequency. Lion's Maid was acquired by Nestlé in 1992, and several of the classic lines disappeared in the consolidation that followed. The chest freezer is still in some shops. The lollies inside are not the same. A metal tin, roughly the size of a large biscuit tin, sitting on the counter with the Butterkist name on the side, full of toffee-coated popcorn that had been coated with a level of toffee that modern versions do not attempt. The tin was the thing. Opening it released a smell that was immediately identifiable and immediately appetizing, and the toffee was thick enough to clump the popcorn together into pieces that required effort. The tin format was phased out in the 1980s in favor of bags, which was a practical decision and a cultural loss in roughly equal measure. The bagged Butterkist still exists. The toffee is lighter. The experience of lifting a lid off a tin on a shop counter on a Saturday afternoon with your pocket money already spent on something else is gone entirely. In some corner shops, especially in tighter-knit communities in the north and in working-class areas of most British cities, you could get things on tick. The shopkeeper kept a book, sometimes an actual book, sometimes just a mental ledger, and your family's name was in it, and what you owed was noted, and it was settled at the end of the week when the wages came in or the benefit arrived. Children sent to the shop for bread or milk or 10 cigarettes for their mam would say put it on the book and the shopkeeper would. And that was that. It required a level of trust between a shopkeeper and a community that was only possible when the shopkeeper had been there long enough to know who was good for it. The corner shop that operated a tick book was embedded in its street in a way that a supermarket cannot be. The ones that replace them do not know your name, not a specific product, not something you could buy, but the most universally remembered detail of the British corner shop experience, mentioned by almost everyone who grew up with it, the small bell mounted above the door that rang when you entered and rang when you left, and that the shopkeeper heard and responded to without looking up, because they already knew by the sound of the footsteps whether it was a child or an adult, a regular or a stranger. The bell told the shop you were there. The shop smelled of everything it sold simultaneously, which was a smell specific to that type of shop and nothing else. The floor was lino or bare board. The counter was high enough that small children had to reach up. And behind it was a person who knew your family, knew what you usually bought, knew how much you had before you'd said a word. That combination, the bell, the smell, the person who knew you, is what the supermarket replaced. It has not been replaced with anything equivalent. Not yet? That is 12. Not all of them are things you could hold in your hand. Some of them are things that existed in the space between you and the person behind the counter, in the time it took to spend your pocket money, in the specific combination of a Saturday morning and a small amount of change and a shop that was open and knew who you were. Those things are harder to lose than a sweet that's been discontinued, and harder to get back. Tell me in the comments. What was your corner shop called? What did you always buy? And do you remember the person behind the counter? If you found this worth your time, subscribing helps me know there's interest in these topics.